भाई मेरा बेटी को प्यार चाहिए, मेरा बेटी का ब्लड आ रहा, ब्लड नीचे से ब्लड आ रहा, प्यार चाहिए, दे दो। हम ऐसे नहीं कर सकते। क्यों नहीं कर सकता? क्यों नहीं कर सकता? क्यों नहीं कर सकता? मेरे को प्यार चाहिए अभी।
म्हणून आम्ही क्षमा मागतो की आम्ही तिथं नाही आहोत. सॉरी.
दोस्तों, इतना ज्यादा मिसमैनेजमेंट, इतना ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम मैंने आज तक नहीं देखा है। मैं सुबह 10 बजे आया हूं इस एयरपोर्ट के ऊपर और आप देख रहे हो पीछे क्या चल रहा है। लोग 3-3 बजे सुबह आके रुके हुए हैं एंड देयर आर नो फ्लाइट्स। क्लैरिटी बिल्कुल नहीं है। बहुत लोग उधर गए, हमने पूछा कि भाई क्या हो रहा है इधर। नो वन नोज एनीथिंग। सुबह से इंडिगो की एक भी फ्लाइट नहीं उड़ी हुई है। मैं 10 बजे आया था, फिर बाद में दिखाया कि भाई 1 बजे होने वाली है, 2 बजे होने वाली है, 3 बजे, अब 5 बज गए, अब 6 बजे उन्होंने कहा हुआ है। और मैं जाके पूछ रहा हूं कि भाई डीले है, जाने वाली है, फ्लाइट उड़ने वाली है, किसी को कुछ पता नहीं है। एक लड़की है उधर इंडिगो के काउंटर पे बस, और 100 लोग 200 लोग पूछ रहे हैं उससे, कुछ पता नहीं है। दे आर नॉट अनाउंसिंग ऑल्सो एनीथिंग। मतलब सोचिए दोस्तों, हमारा IBTR, आई हैव स्पेंड नियरली I don't know lakhs of rupees for this event, और मुझे दिल्ली पहुंचना है, but I don't have option, बैकअप नहीं मिल रहा है। अकाशा और बाकी सब एयरलाइंस कोई भी सीट नहीं अवेलेबल है।
Hello and welcome. You're watching The Wire. I'm Sravasti Dasgupta. Thousands of passengers across Indian airports have been left in the lurch as over hundreds of flights from IndiGo have been cancelled over the last few days. The situation has unraveled over the last couple of days, and today we have seen that the DGCA has directed that the FDTL norms, which allowed pilots longer rest periods, has been given an exemption to IndiGo, a temporary exemption, one-time exemption that is being called, but questions also being raised about the duopoly in the aviation sector and the government's role in allowing this to take place. Joining me to discuss this is MK Venu, founding editor at The Wire. Venu, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi. Yeah.
So, Venu, just let's get started with the fact that in the morning when, because we know that Parliament is in session, this was raised in Parliament. Union Parliamentary Affairs Minister Kiren Rijiju said that he has spoken to Aviation Minister and he's apprised of the matter. We saw images of the Aviation Minister meeting representatives from IndiGo. There was some chatter about the fact that this is due to the FDTL norms that have come into force last month. But now the DGCA has, in a sense, buckled to IndiGo and given them a one-time exemption and said that these FDTL norms, which allowed pilots to have longer rest periods, will not kick in right now during the peak travel period, and that will only happen in February. Now, pilot bodies are not happy about this. The government once again, in a sense, giving in to the demands made by IndiGo. How do you see this?
So, Sravasti, first of all, the government is not supposed to, monitor or regulate or intervene in these matters. If you see the European Union and other, more sophisticated aviation markets, the regulator there, Sravasti, is an independent regulator. He has full autonomy to decide how to deal with violations of norms by airlines. Here, Sravasti, what happens is the PMO decides, because the DGCA doesn't have any powers. This is one of the perennial problems with Indian infrastructure regulation, not just in aviation. You name any other sector, the regulator is weak. The regulator doesn't have teeth. Even if there is a formal regulator installed with the help of a law, that law provides for the government to direct the regulator as to what he should do, what he should not do. And this is not the first time. This has happened in the past also. Whenever there's a crisis vis-a-vis any airlines, and as you said, in India, unfortunately, the way policy has panned out, we have ended up with a duopoly. There used to be 5-6 airlines earlier. Today we just have Air India run by Tatas, IndiGo, run by whatever the Bhatias and the Interglobe, and IndiGo has a 61% market share. I mean, how do you 61% market share, and IndiGo and Tata's they are virtually in a duopoly situation. So what happens is, whenever there is a crisis like this, they are treated as too big to fail. So suddenly the entire matter would have gone to the PMO. The regulator, of course, is helpless because the regulator has put in place norms which are not being enforced, which are being violated. Now, after the Air India the crash, Ahmedabad crash, this issue had come up. The pilots union had talked about flight duty time limitation. Now, what is flight duty time limitations? That the pilots should have enough rest besides their leave. That the leave aside, leave is part of their benefits, and rest is very important. Rest is between two flights. After they do a 24-hour haul of 48 hours, they need 24 hours of rest. Now, this rest is separate from leave, and the FDTL norms were tightened, especially after the Ahmedabad and of course other complaints that have been coming to the DGCA. So this FDTL norms have now been relaxed for IndiGo. It has been postponed. The implementation of new flight duty the limitation norms, flight duty limitation norms have been postponed. Now, on what basis has this been postponed? Now, who is answerable? DGCA is not answerable. It is PMO which controls the DGCA. I'm being very blunt. Any problem with the aviation sector goes away straight to any problem which is very serious, which the regulator is not able to resolve. It goes there, and that's exactly what is happening. And the bigger issue is, Sravasti, now this is just a one-off. They have tried to sort of juggle with FDTL norms and the leave that pilots are entitled to. They've tried to sort of overlap the two. But the real issue is, in July 2025, the DGCA, Director General of Civil Aviation, had flagged 263 safety-related lapses across 8 Indian carriers just a few months ago. And this FDTL norms are linked to safety, right? Because the pilots need some minimum rest before going on to the next flight. So among these, Air India had the maximum 51 breaches. There were a large number of breaches on IndiGo's part, and these are the two big airlines. And among these breaches, there were a large number of level 1 breaches. Level 1 breaches, Sravasti, are serious category breaches. Critical issues like improper aircraft maintenance, documentation of expired parts, or crew training shortcomings. No, this is the way we are conducting our whole aviation regulation. I mean, I'm shocked that such things have come to such a pass. That
because you're mentioning crew. Because you're mentioning crew, I want to ask you that there was a report in the Morning Context which spoke about the fact that, of course, the FDTL norms and IndiGo's resistance to it has been a factor. But there was a recruitment drive camp organized by an international airline which saw a lot of crew members, pilots and airline crew kind of going for that recruitment drive, which compounded the already existing crew shortage and that was going on in IndiGo. How much of that is true, that the fact that IndiGo has not provided a congenial work atmosphere for its pilots and crew, and now the FDTL in the DGCA bending to the IndiGo is not good news for pilots who are essentially being asked to work without proper rest?
So, Sravasti, it's a fact that this is not a new problem, Sravasti. For the last, I would say 5 years, after COVID, there was a recovery in domestic passenger travel, right? And last 2-3 years, domestic passenger growth has been running at a tearing, clip. It's 15% growth year after year. Now, this growth was very high even in the decade before the COVID, and even before that. Generally, Indian aviation domestic passenger growth, Sravasti, has been in double digits. It's 10% plus. There have been times when it is 15%, long periods where it's 15%. Now, at 15% domestic passenger growth, Sravasti, you are looking at compounded doubling of everything in annual traffic, doubling in 5 years or 6 years, and today it is at about 380, 390 million passengers annually, traveling. This would have been about 6, 7 years ago. This was half of this. Now, another 5 years, this 380 could become 500. So you see the rate at which domestic passenger travel is growing, in terms of traffic, number of passengers. Now, the crisis is that we have just now 2 airlines. Earlier, there were many airlines. And these 2 airlines are now struggling to meet all the requirements to drive such a scale-up of business, to enable such a massive scale-up. So you have a situation where you have to have more aircraft, you have to have more resources, you have to have more pilots, more first officers, more crew. Now, this is where I think the DGCA, the regulator, is not able to come to grips with the situation, not able to enforce, because these airlines are growing rapidly, as I said, 15% a year traffic growth, and they are not able to match such a growth trajectory with adequate resources. And that's where all these problems come, flight duty time limitation, overlapping, mixing flight duty with leave, which is what they've done, that relaxation, aircraft maintenance, documentation of parts which are going to expire. There were also reports of aircraft which were being flown by some airlines which were not flying worthy, in the past. There have been such reports also. Sometimes there is also a criticism, Sravasti, that the DGCA itself, since this government is not interested in creating a solid, empowered, properly staffed regulatory body, the DGCA itself is not adequately staffed. That's what my assessment is. There is just some members, and they are constantly grappling with crisis situations. And what happens whenever there's a crisis, all these airline promoters, they have direct connections with the government. They will straight away make petitions to the civil aviation minister, PMO, and they'll seek some temporary fixes, band-aid fixes, like it has happened just now. This is a pure band-aid fix. What has happened with IndiGo? I'm shocked that a company like IndiGo is asking for until February 10 to fix all their restructuring of hiring more crews, or restructuring issues, or reorganizing their flights, etc. Who gives you in modern aviation? Who gives you 2 months, 3 months when you're you're covering 60% of the market? I mean, I'm appalled that they were not prepared for this, and because these FDTL norms, the new norms, were known to them, right? So I'm not just saying IndiGo. Even Air India has been caught napping a number of times, as you know, on various issues. They've also been lax, and I don't know. There are systemic issues. There's a DGCA problem, regulatory problem, and there's a policy problem at the government level. And
so because you're speaking about the duopoly of it, one of the reasons that IndiGo wanted to delay the enforcement of the FDTL norms was after the peak winter travel months. But around this time, reports are telling us that Air India reduced the number of flights that it would be operating, but IndiGo did not do so. It very well knows that there is a pilot and crew shortage. Now, government has faced repeated questions even in Parliament that why are you allowing this duopoly globally, even when it comes to pricing of airline tickets, which has been increasing continuously. In fact, today, amid all these cancellations, we have seen domestic flights, for instance, Bangalore to Mumbai or Mumbai to Kolkata are 70,000 rupees one way. So and at every step, the government has resisted intervening and said that it's a market and they have to be allowed to run the way that it is. So is it okay to just blame Air India and IndiGo and not question the government? Because anytime any such question is posed to the government, they kind of pass the buck to these carriers.
So Sravasti, I agree with you. The primary fault is that of the governments. There is a policy disaster. The aviation policy is a disaster, if you ask me. Aviation policy and aviation regulation in the last 10 years under this regime has been disastrous. And I'll tell you why. You know, what happens is when you create a duopoly, I mean, I don't want to go into how SpiceJet has been running and how this government has been treating SpiceJet. SpiceJet is, you know, in popular lore, it is considered, a political airline. You know, I mean, an airline which has great big political connections, and they also, from time to time, they go into huge losses. They have a political cloud. They get waivers. They get regulatory waivers. They get waivers from SEBI. They go to the market to raise more money. Anyway, that's a separate story. I'm not going to that. There have been there were many airlines. Now what has happened is we have ended up virtually the majority of the market is now virtually controlled by just two, and IndiGo has 61% market share. So what happens in a duopoly, Sravasti, is that like you said, that Air India reduced its number of flights, anticipating that it may have problems with the number of pilots, etc., since there is a growing air traffic. IndiGo did not do it or could not do it. I'll give you a reason. There's an economic reason. Because when you fly when you have 61%, 65 at times 65% of the market, you're running. I don't know how many flights you have. More than 2,000 flights a day. You have 400 aircrafts. So you try to take as many passengers as you can. So you create scale. So when you create scale, your per unit cost goes down. So they are only focused on the per unit cost. That if you'll make profits if you have these many passengers. If you reduce the number of flights, the number of passengers goes down, and your scale economy shrinks. So your profitability shrinks. So if you flog one aircraft as many times as you can, which they have been doing, it obviously requires more crew. It requires more first officers, pilots, and you have to give them rest. All those problems happen when you increase the number of flights. So if you reduce the number of flights, the overall revenues go down, profitability goes down. So this is exactly what the regulator is supposed to look at, right? You cannot compromise passenger safety to sort of help to help individual airlines to meet their revenue or profit targets. So this is where policy comes in. So this is where the regulator comes in. When I say regulator doesn't have any teeth, Indian regulator is not autonomous. So I put everything at the door of the government. It is the civil aviation minister and it is the PMO, as I've been saying from the beginning. They have to take the primary responsibility for what is going on. And I'll end by saying that this is an embarrassment for the fourth largest for a country which boasts of a fourth largest economy and a global economy. What do you think will foreigners think when they are here trying to travel between Delhi, Bombay, and if they get stranded for 6-7 hours? Every foreigner would wonder whether he would compare this experience with his own country, his or her own countries. I don't think such things happen in other sophisticated markets.
Before we end, I want to ask you one final question. That the union government says that they will form a committee to look into this and kind of try to analyze what has gone wrong. But going forward, the fact that you spoke about the DGCA not having teeth and everything being centralized and it going straight up to the PMO, going forward, what is the way out of this? Is there an urgent need, would you say, to come out of this duopoly and the government's intervention to ensure that the market is not monopolized in this manner?
Urgent? I mean, all that I'm telling you should have been done as of yesterday. Sravasti, airlines is a very serious business. Passenger safety is involved. You have to anticipate, 2 years ahead that this is how traffic is growing. This is how the resource, this is what the resources are. And this is how the market should develop. So what is the job of a regulator? Any competition commission literature will tell you the job of a regulator is to ensure an orderly growth of the market. And part of the orderly growth, say over the next 5 years, you have to anticipate problems. Part of the orderly growth is actually anticipating all this and making the airlines act. And the policy needs to complement that. But this government actually, I mean, there's so much arrogance in this government. I'm sorry to say that they think that everything will fix itself. Let there be chaos. I think at some level the basic premise on which this government operates is that the market is growing. Let there be some chaos, and the chaos will fix itself. I mean, it's a bit like how we are dealing with the air, pollution in Delhi. I'm telling you, there's a cultural aspect to this. And I see very similar. By the way, I see very similar tendencies in the telecom sector. There too, we have two big companies doing well. They are like duopolies, which is Reliance Jio and Airtel. Vodafone is going to the dogs. That company is as good as it wants, capital every 2 years, huge capital. It doesn't have capital. It has shrunk its operations. Vodafone services are very poor. You ask anybody, and it is the government which is trying to pump in money into Vodafone equity and trying to waive their loans in lieu of increasing their equity. Now somebody may ask, there is no regulator these days asking, what the hell is the Modi government doing by acquiring progressively more and more stake in Vodafone, which is now Birla, run by Birlas, Vodafone Birla. Because Vodafone itself has exited, in the sense they don't want to put in more capital, right? And in the name of some competition, we have a duopoly. In the name of some nominal competition, they are keeping Birla Vodafone alive through all these mechanisms. You must have seen it. The case goes to Supreme Court every once in a while, and Supreme Court says, okay, some waiver can be given or not be given. And then you have, and there's a third leg there, BSNL and MTNL, which again the government is trying to, every 5 years they'll put in some 1 lakh crore, 2 lakh crore. They've spent about 3 lakh crores on BSNL, and to no avail, not doing anything. BSNL has not increased its market share. Do you see anybody using BSNL phones? Why I'm saying all this is the policy attitude of the government to very, very critical infrastructure services, whether it's aviation, whether it is telecom. I mean, you can see this kind of problem spilling over to other sectors also. I mean, I see it, and I anticipate a lot of such issues, like even the airport sector. So is the airport being regulated? Are the airport fees being regulated? I don't know what the airport regulator is doing, but recently there was some controversy about passengers being made to pay higher fees for use of airports. So it's all coming to the consumer. So my final point is, when you have a chaotic market growth with tendency towards duopoly, monopoly, and duopolies, the consumers will get killed. The consumers will suffer, and that's exactly what is happening in India. And I don't think this government cares.
All right, and the fact that the consumer is getting crushed under the pressure of all this is visible everywhere on social media and on your television screens, as many of you may even have family and friends who are at the moment in airports across India suffering the results of this. Thank you so much, Venu, for joining us, and to our viewers for watching.
Thank you.